Another sit down with DM and Cuevro. Aha! How y'all doing? Um, so I think I left off on still on Toronto and Savannah Street, where I learned a lesson on how to move forward from any bad situation that you're in. That little patch of land, that little neighborhood, um, yeah, it really changed me forever. The other thing was, the other thing that I can say about that patch of neighborhood, or just that little patch of land where you know there was so much chaos going on. Um, that's what it was about. Just trying to survive it and get through it. A lot of people don't go through as didn't go through as much as the neighborhoods that we moved into. So from that patch of neighborhood, I think the next area that we moved to was this place called I think it was called the Navarro. I think we were part of yeah, it was in Navarro because there was an elementary there called Austin Austin Elementary. I had gone from I went to three elementaries. I went to Sam Houston Elementary, and I went to Roosevelt Elementary, and I went to Austin Elementary, and Navarro Elementary, and then I went to oh man, I forgot the name of the other one. But that before I get to that one, we moved to a neighborhood. Yeah, we moved to the second neighborhood. It was a Navarro Elementary, and Austin Elementary, and in that area, well, we had come from the south side to mid north side. It was halfway across. So the Nevada was like halfway across from the south side to the middle to the north side of McAllen. So the city of McAllen was divided between the south, the middle, and the north. And then you had your west side and your east side. But that was also caught in the middle. So the second neighborhood we moved to was the Nevada, and well, just because we moved areas didn't mean that things were gonna get any better, which they didn't. See, as you go learning, you know what these people are doing in their communities. So from the neighborhood that we moved to, which was the south side, from that Toronto and that Savannah Avenue, uh, we had gone to the middle part of McAllen. And in the middle part of McAllen, what was going on the south to the middle, it was almost still the same. So you had your gangsters and all your Mexican type of people to the south, and it was very you know you had your farm workers, your people that would go to work at the fields. And my grandfather was one of those. He except but my grandfather was he did it smart where he got other people to work for him, and he owned a bunch of trucks, and he would take people up and work in the fields along with his family. My mom, she used to have to wake up. like at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, make them breakfast, and then still go out there with my grandfather's lights on from the truck and work in the fields. So that was her way, her brought up, working in these fields in Idaho, and North Dakota, and Minneapolis, and all these people where there was farmland, all these places where there was farmland, that's where they would go and work. So they were always, leaving Texas and having the experience of going out there and seeing other places. So my mom was very attuned to that. You know, get up and leave, do what you have to do, work where you have to work. So she was very work orientated. Forcefully. A lot of my aunts, some of my aunts stayed in Minneapolis, and others, Kansas City, South Dakota, North Dakota, Chicago. I have family still in Chicago. They stayed there. They decided not to come back to Texas, and so those people are called the Cáceres. That's my mom's last name. So the Cáceres were like people, workers, field workers, but they had their crew. So when we moved to the middle part, to that Navarro neighborhood, well, the politics didn't change. There was still, except in that area, there was more. There was rockers and bikers and cholos and gangsters, and so in that area, it was a little bit more open to getting to the ridge side, to the north side of McAllen. So when we moved there, the politics moved with us from the south side. So any shit that we had going on the south side, it followed us to that neighborhood. So since my brother was, you know, known to associate heavily with the south side, he had issues with the people there in that neighborhood. So getting to school, yeah, it was a hassle, you know. So in that area, that's where they started, trying to transfer me into the cholo mentality and the lowrider mentality, and they started dressing me up with little lowrider shirts and little khaki pants. And he had a my brother had a girlfriend there in that neighborhood that, well, a lot of people didn't approve of it because it was like Romeo and Juliet. She was from the middle part of McAllen, he was from the south side. Well, the the gangsters there wanted, you know that was their girl. They were the ones that had first dibs. But along came my brother and started going out with her, and supposedly, um, he had a child with her, and he reached out to me a couple of years back through one of my family members from the Matas. So the guy, you know, it was true. He had a kid with her, but she moved away, and he didn't know. All he knew was that it was a rumor. So that was an issue, a big issue he had there. So it was a little uncomfortable. And then plus the way my mom was, my mom was the type of person that really didn't take crap of anybody. She didn't take nobody's shit. So along with the shit that she would start there in the neighborhood, we had to work around that. I didn't. You know, I kind of like, would make friends, anywhere, and I would try to manipulate the situation to work out for me, as I came from the south side with that knowledge. So I always kept it cool. I always try to, make friends with the people in the area that I knew others, you know. So I was getting, you know, more educated on shutting the fuck up and listening and watching how these people move. So I I didn't come with, you know, with that reputation for being a destructive person, you know. So and then plus in that area, I had a family member that was pretty well known. Um, so and he was also the type of person that, you know, his father taught him at a very young age, you know, take care of your own shit. You know, leave the problems, leave your friends' problems to them. You know, let them deal with it. Let them try to get their own selves out of it. If they got themselves into a bad situation, then they should be educated enough to get out of it. So that's what, you know, I learned from them. So that just added that to my book, you know, of how trying to evade, you know, certain people and how to get the right people on your side. And so I always kept it cool. I try not to talk too much. I try not to I try not to shit. You know, like the saying goes, don't shit where you know, don't shit where you eat. So as I was, you know, meeting these people in this new area, you know, I mimicked them, I shadowed them, and like I said in the what I learned on the south side was to, you know, connect the dots. You know, if A led to B in a destructive way, then I would try to jump B and try to get to C because I knew that C was more profitable. And so I just grew up, you know, trying to understand the politics and the tribes that I was visiting and checking out how these Indians, you know, how successful they were at trying to just stay alive because, you know, people were getting killed. And it was kind of the wild, wild west. So I went to an elementary called Austin, and I don't know why we jumped from. I don't know why there was two elementaries, and I don't know how why I ended up, you know, attending both. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was the people that surrounded, you know, the schools. So you had, you know, these local legends. You know, you had a person called Jerry El Camao, Jerry the Burnt. He was the guy that, you know, had an accident, got burnt in a car, and just he was a scary, you know, scary type of guy. You know, it's just either you knew him or you didn't. And if you knew him, well, usually you had to, you know, do what they were doing. But if you knew how to evade that shit, you know, you you got their protection or you got their friendship, you got their loyalty by just, you know, saying hi to these people, you know, and if they respected you, they would say hi back. And this followed me to my adulthood because these people didn't leave their area. You know, they were dedicated to the neighborhood. They were dedicated to that life. And so, if you were on the south side and you had a good reputation and you knew people around you, well, they usually took care of you. Didn't matter where you were at. Didn't matter what neighborhood you were at. It was just that, you know, if you were known as a good person, that was it. You know, from about, I think I'm 10. I'm 9 or 10. 10. Yeah. And so I'm dealing with these adults that are running around rampant, you know, causing chaos in these neighborhoods. But along with the chaos they caused, you know, they would get back. They would take care of their neighborhood. They would take care of you, you know, just by your name being associated, coming out of their mouth, you know, you were taken care of. So basically, I could go anywhere, and not just because you had, you know, you knew them meant you you could do whatever you want or be destructive. No, you still, you know, you still had to conduct yourself in a certain way. So the schools weren't the problem. It was trying to maneuver around these people that controlled these areas. And in that area, there was many, you know, chiefs. And there was too many chiefs and too little Indians. There was more chiefs than there was Indians. So getting to school, you know, you'd see all these shit, you know, going down, these fights happening early in the morning, where these adults would go and fight, you know, on the elementary playground, these schools, and you'd see them, you know, get into these fucking massive badass fights, these fucking brawls, you know, where two motherfuckers was just knocking the shit out of each other, you know, some of them had chains, some of them had brass knuckles, some of them had pipes, you know, they were fighting with knives, you know. We're talking a time before, you know, people were disrespecting each other with guns. And so, yeah. So the maneuvering and the learning and how to deal with these situations, it just made you a stronger person, you know. If, you know, you didn't have, you know, any way else to do, you know, you couldn't, you were stuck in between all this shit. As a kid, we had our dog killed. We had these rabbits that, and they killed them. We had a dog, you know, they fed glass to him, and we saw the dog die. You know, shit blood out of his fucking asshole. And one of our dogs, they hung him, you know, and that's what they would do. You know, they would fuck up your animals. They would fuck up your, you know, where it hurt. They would, you know, try to burn your house down. They would, you know, try to burn your car up. And it was nonstop, nonstop violence, unnecessary hate. So from the south side to the middle, the same shit. Just the same fucking wars. Just the same people fighting over a piece of land that wasn't even fucking theirs. And I'm not saying they were bad people. They were just, that's just, you know, that's how they were brought up, how they were taught. You know, there was no other, you know, it didn't make them a bad person. It's just they were standing up for what they believed. So what's wrong with that? I didn't see an issue with it. I saw people fighting for what they believed in with whatever time they had on this earth. And so, not too many things happen in that neighborhood that I can say had an impact on my life. I mean, there was a local skate land there where, you know, as a kid we would go and, on Saturdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sunday. You know, typically the party nights like Tuesday, Wednesdays. You know, it's always the same thing, always the same nights. So we used to walk down to that skate land, and mm, we would have fun. But at the end of the night or at the beginning, you had your scrimmages between these people that hated each other in the neighborhood, or they were from a different area, or they were from a different gang that would come into that area because they would come and skate at that skate spot, skate land, your skates. So whatever. So maneuvering in that area, it was kind of difficult, because you were considered lower than them because like you were a South Sider, like the South Sea, coming from that area, you you really had to watch your step, especially you weren't born in that neighborhood. It was in the respect wasn't given to you. You had to earn it. So as you went along, you earned your stripes. You earned your respect. As I was saying, I always try to, you know, befriend the worstest to the coolest, to the meanest, to the deadliest person, just to say, I know him, I know him, I know him, without being a name dropper. So, so there was beautiful people there, and there was, these girls that I think her name was Miriam, and her two other sisters, Monica, and I forgot the name of the little sister, but they were beautiful. I mean, they had blue eyes, and the other one had green eyes, and they looked, kind of like what New York, kind of like Madonna, Italian. We had a lot of Italian families living in that area. You know, either they were Cuban or they were Italian descent. Um, and they were cool people. And it's just because they were, committing crimes, or they were, uh, doing things wrong. You know, you still couldn't label them because when they were needed, they were there for you. And so I befriended a lot of people from that area. To some of them to this day say, you know, hey man, you're part of our family. When I was locked up down here, or when I used to go to the city jail, whatever, some of these people were there, and they're like, "Hey, Danny," and they're like, "Whoa, what the fuck? You know those people?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I came, I used to live in the South Side," and so it would cost a little bit of tension, but after they would find out, that I wasn't affiliated, to any gang, so you know, also by keeping myself, away from, you know, claiming anything, which never claimed to be anything other than claim who I was. You know, another thing they would say, take care of your reputation. Your reputation follows you. So along with that, that's the other lesson I learned, and I learned it more in that area. To You had a choice. You know, you had a choice to gangbang. You had a choice to get on, get in, or get off the car. And if you weren't affiliated, well, you didn't have that protection or full protection from the neighborhood, from the barrio, but they would let you exist, just because, well, you weren't known for causing havoc or having a loose mouth. And they knew, you know, they knew who the big mouths, or they knew, you know, it usually people, you know, put these people in their place, and just imagine having, friends, and those friends come and tell you, hey man, this is a situation, this is what's going on. We know who you are, we believe you. Um, so that was, the respect that they would give you. They knew you were honest, and they knew, you know, who you were. They knew that, you know, you were just this on the sideline. But if you know, shit got bad, and they'd ask you, hey man, we need your help. Well, even though you weren't affiliated, you still had, you know, you still had something that they needed from you, that, you could help, and we could help. Well, even though you weren't affiliated with them, you still get that respect for at least giving them an idea, how to get out of a situation. Or, you know, I was never the type of person to go and tell somebody, hey, that's what I was known for. I was known for not going and oh, I know this, I know that. So they always knew there was these people that just kept their mouth shut, but they kept their eyes open, and when you really needed to, you didn't even have to say anything. So just by the way you moved, they knew they could respect you. And so I knew how to move. I knew when to open my mouth and not when to open my mouth. And, you know, just by your conversation, just by what you talk about, especially if you were a person, you know, not always picking yourself up like me, I'm so cool, I'm so cool, I'm so cool. So that's how I maneuvered myself in that neighborhood, and that's how I, knew these people. And plus, like I said, I had a cousin there that was very, 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 very respected. And his father was a person that was very, very, very respected in that area. So as long as, you mimicked them, you were good. And there was a lot of corruption there, man. Like super corruption. We had a priest at a local church around that area that was, I mean, the guy was like he looked like a gangster priest, like a priest that would, like, fuck you up. The guy had like gold chains and crosses and just everything made out of gold, and he had a Mercedes Benz, and you know the guy was, I guess, embezzling or taking, the funds from the church, and he was living it up. I mean, so, you know, I didn't see nothing wrong with it. The guy was having a good time. I mean, the guy was, take helping you, take your sins away. 7 Hail Marys and no fathers. If you know, you know. So yeah, that was another lesson that you learned. Sometimes you do need to take off, a little bit off the top. Hey, if the opportunity bestows to you, and you have the opportunity, to advance, or have a good time, and the reality of the situation, and that sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And so, hey, that priest was doing what he needed to do to have a good time while he was here. And what's wrong with that? So that's the other education I got in that neighborhood, was to respect your surroundings, and to respect the fact that you're not from there. You're not gonna get to a neighborhood and wanna, you know get involved in the politics, and wanna your foot down and said, I'm here, and you got to respect me. You had to earn it. You had to earn it. And so what I learned in that neighborhood was, you know, respect the people that are from there, that were born there. You can't just come into somebody's house and expect for them to, treat you like a king. So yeah, so you know, that's the first time I ever um also, interviewing myself. The question, I would ask would be, when did you ever experience racism here in the valley? Yeah. Um, not on Savannah and not on Toronto Street, you know, but when I got to the middle side, yeah, I the very first time I, experienced that level of disrespect. There was a girl that would hang out there at the skate land, and we went to different elementaries, but we would see each other there. And there was a place where we used to go walk. It was a high school called Mackay, and they had a little track that people would go and walk around in that, exercise there and walk around in the circles on the track. And then you had your tennis courts where people would go and play tennis. And so either I would see that girl there, or I would see her at the skate land. And one one time, that was my first kiss I ever had. You know, well, no, that was my second time kissing a girl. The On Toronto Street, there was a girl named Beatty. Her dad was like the jack of all trades. Like, the guy didn't work. He would just walk around the neighborhood collecting cans, and he would go to the alleys and collect bottles. And he was one of the ones I used to, give my bottles to. The facade I was creating with my mom with the bottles. So yeah, so she was the first girl I ever kissed. But the second girl I kissed was this girl, and she gave me a Coca-Cola watch. And I remember going to Skayland with a Coca-Cola watch, being all happy and everything. And my my cousins that lived there, um, they used to go to the Skayland too. And I remember seeing her, and she's like, "Why are you so happy?" I was like, "Cause I kissed a girl and I liked it. I liked the song. I kissed a girl and I liked it." And she was like, "Ah, you kissed a girl for the first time?" I was like, "Yes, I'm floating in the air, like I'm saying, like ah." So it was pretty cool, because it wasn't just a kiss. It was just like, like a kiss, and here's a watch, and so it was like, the first time, actually saying, okay, we're gonna girlfriend and boyfriend. It was puppy love. We were kids, and so she gave me that watch. It was a Coca Cola watch. I don't know. It was like a Swatch watch, but before, I guess Coca Cola had done that before the Swatch watches. I don't even remember the Swatch watch. So about the second or third day, somebody came knocking on our door, and it was this mother. She was saying, "I'm the mother, and I'm so pissed off. Your son stole the watch from my daughter." And the girl's standing right there. She's standing right there with her mom, looking at me like, and I'm like, you know, again, I learned to keep my mouth fucking shut. So I was kind of like that guy from the teen movies where, like, you didn't defend yourself. You just knew, it was a girl, and you learned. That's another thing about these people. As destructive as some of them were, some of them knew how to respect women. So I learned how to do that as well. So I didn't defend myself, against it, and I gave the watch back. The mother took the watch back, and I went home with the girl, and she just, I don't want you to ever see my daughter again. You know, being racist to me because I was from the South Side, and like I'm telling you, we weren't that far apart. It was just that was the politics. So I defend myself. That's the way it went down. And then a couple of days later, after that, we were at Skateland, and she shows up and she apologizes to me. And she's like, I couldn't say anything. My mom. And I couldn't tell her that I was seeing you, and I couldn't tell her that that I wanted to be your girlfriend. And so I was like, yeah, but why? Why tell her that I stole the watch? She's like, I didn't say that. She started saying that, and it's just, like I said, I couldn't defend myself. I couldn't tell her that, that I loved you, and I couldn't tell her that, 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 because they won't accept you. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, sure, whatever. I didn't do a big deal about it. So we still kept seeing each other for a while. I accepted it. I was. I was a kid from the South Side. What could I do? Couldn't do nothing about it. So I couldn't defend myself against it. I was from the South Side. There was nothing I could do. I knew who I was. I knew that my family came with a reputation. And it was what it was. You couldn't do. There was no way of, me going around it. So it did hurt. It did hurt because, well, they were judging you for something that you couldn't help. I just, what could I say? How could I defend myself against it? Even though if I got up and defend myself against it, I would have probably lost. Because then her dad would probably got involved, and then it would have just become a big fucking pickle, a big stink, where these adults would probably fucking destroy each other over their kids. So I just learned to be quiet, accept it. And like I said, we still saw each other for a while, and it was cool. So yeah, that was my first actual memory of feeling uncomfortable in my own skin. You know, I used to see these white people. I used to see how they moved, how they dressed. And, they usually always look clean. And for a while there, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to, have a career. I just saw that their lives were way more comfortable than my parents, you know. And then after living there for a while, they down the street from where we lived, they started. There was this development of a home. Somebody started building a home there, and well, it turned out that the people that were building the home, they were, the father was a, construct in he was like, I guess, in construction, and so they ended up building a house there, and they moved into that home. Um, their last name was Vela, Vela Construction. I think they, to this day, they still make homes. Very, very, very cool people, man. Very cool people. Mm, right there, it's where it started kicking off a little bit more on how to generate money. Because I would hear after they built the home and everything, I used to go and hang out with their kids. Shout out to Aaron. Just their kid, Aaron, man, Aaron Villa. Um, he looked like Luke Skywalker. I mean, all three siblings, well, all four siblings, the mother and the father, they look like movie stars. They don't look like nobody in the area, you know, except the people that were, either Italian or Cuban, you know. But their family, just beautiful people, man, beautiful people. So Aaron looked like Luke Skywalker. The sister, her name was Anya or something like that. Anya, I think. But oh my God, just colored eyes, beautiful. And then there was Billy, Billy Villa. Here you go, Billy Villa. Just kidding, man. He was a bully. He was that typical older brother, Shat, Weird Science, the one that gets turned into a piece of shit. But it was just typical, It's typical, you know, with these families that were like well off or rich orientated. Just their mentality was different. So Billy was a person that would pick on younger people, and they didn't take crap for nobody. It was a real bad neighborhood, but they were respected. Yeah, and again, the mother, whew, the mother was just she looked like the evil person from the novellas or from the soap opera. Beautiful, just gorgeous person, man. Their mother was beautiful. It still is. Sometimes I run into the mom and the father at a Chinese place, Chinese restaurant there in McAllen. An all-you-can-eat place. But the last time I ran into them there, I told her, I remember it used to be so beautiful. Like we used to look at you in that neighborhood and like, what are they doing here? Like, what a beautiful family. And she was like, what do you mean was? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. She's still beautiful, ma'am. And so, yeah, that's the respect I got from them. Remember, in the South Side, I got the respect from the people, the Matas that weren't, we just shared the last name, but I got their respect. Like I could go into their home with no issue. So this is the same way, in this neighborhood, many homes I got invited to. Another racist one was from a family member. No, not they weren't family members, but the father was he used to cut hair. He was a barber, and he had his own shop, downtown, McAllen. And for some reason, they didn't want me in their home, which was cool. You know, it's just I don't know what information they had or what they got. It just didn't. They didn't think I was a good influence on their kid. So see, that's another one where you get squished just by who or where you come from. So that's another one I experienced one time. The kid, they had this in their home because I had been to their home. Their son had invited me, and I had been in their tent. But the dad got pissed when he knew that I was there, and so he had this real cool. Since they had money, they weren't rich, but they had money enough to buy their son a nacho machine. So like this kid had a snow cone machine and he had a nacho machine, you know, there in his home. Like the ones used to go to the store and buy the nachos and scoop the cheese up and everything. So he always had this little smorgasbord board or and this little buffet of things, that ready for him when he would get out of school. So the second time he invited me over to, partake with him in his after school, you know, little things that they would put together for him. So, because at that time there was, kids that were latchkey kids. You would get home, your parents weren't there, so they would leave stuff prepared for you when you would get home. So, yeah, so that was my experience with them. That was the second time experiencing, racism like that, where it's like, being racist against you because not just because of the color of your skin, it's also um, your association or where you come from. So yeah, so that was with that, and back to the family, the Vela family. You know what I learned from them was that, well, the father. I would hear the fathers. You know, he was he was an architect because he would draw these plans up for these homes. You know, would check them out sometimes as he was working, you know, doing this stuff. But what I learned from them was that no matter if you had money and you had good parents, just didn't mean nothing. You know, like, you know, I'm not gonna go into the story because I don't have the right to. But I saw, you know, how their family format, you know, was wasn't working. You know, it's just doesn't matter. You know, you have money or not. So that's what I learned from them. You know, what a beautiful family and everything. But you know, being in that area, it just wasn't for them. And so, shout out to the villas. Mad respect for your dad, your mom, and Billy. No issues with you, Aaron, Luke Skywalker. Your mom told me that, and yeah, your mom was remembering that you used to look like Luke Skywalker. But yeah, so they were a cool family that made it out of there, and they're very successful right now, and not 1 ounce of jealousy to them. Mad respect to them. Thank you for inviting me into your home, and thank you for treating me, you know, with respect and treating me, you know, cool as a kid. That's the memory I have about the Velas. So yeah, so that was a good experience, you know, being able to watch their father, you know, maneuver around the politics in the neighborhood and how they just stayed away from it and didn't get involved, you know, other than the little issues that they had, you know, with you, sometimes, you know, having a daughter or a son, you know, they fall in love, maybe with the wrong person. And so, but I saw them, you know, get out of there, you know, mentally intact. You know, they fixed their situation, they moved on. And there was other people that just that didn't happen to them. You know, some of them are still there, still living in that area. Like I said, some people just they buy a home, they station themselves there. That's their neighborhood, that's their barrio, and either they become part of the politics that surrounds the neighborhood, or they pack up and leave. And since they weren't born there, they weren't raised there, it was easier for them to get up and leave, especially if they had the money to do it. Like that's what my father would do. And it came time again where, you know, things were getting too out of control and too out of my brother was getting too much trouble. And then my sister started getting and then also involved in the politics of the neighborhood. And it came time to, you know, get up and move. So from there, I don't know. I don't know if I'm not remembering other stuff, but yeah, I mean, there was some cool people. Also, there was these guys that were twins, and they had this sister named Violet. Like, god damn, that girl. She was like one of those. I don't know. You remember that song from Marilyn Manson, where there's a girl in the hot tub, and it's a cover tune. It was from a teen movie, but before rockers existed or punk girls existed here in the valley, you know, it was just seen, you know, these people with purple hair. Like she had purple hair. The way they call it violet, she had like violet hair. She would paint her hair violet, and then she had a bunch of tattoos. So it was she was just out of place. You know, like I said, the South Side was all gangsters and it was all cholos. And then the area that we moved in, it was a little bit more woke, you know, more awake. They were more in, you know, into the rocker, you know, style because it was halfway to getting to the rich people. And so in that area, it was, you know, like I said, it was rockers, cholos, gangsters, and punks, and you know, it was just a genre of music, you know, that in that neighborhood it was mixed. And so those two twins had that sister, and it's like, wow, man, just everybody, wow. And then we used to go to the local swimming pool, and she used to hang out there. So just imagine, you know, this girl looked like she belonged in, you know, in the magazines, you know, tattoo magazines, or the, you know, true punk rock. So that was the other thing there also that I learned that, you know, you can mimic both sides, you know, and actually get away with it. So you would talk to these cholo gangster mentality people, and then you would talk to these gangster rocker type of people, and so then you had your cholo punks, and before even those words existed, you had a mix of different types of genres, you know, living in the same neighborhood. And then another thing, there was a store named Rubens, which was super cool. They always had, you know, everything stocked in there from different areas. You know, they would bring stuff in from Mexico, and they would bring stuff in from San Antonio and other places. They always had a variety of a melting pot of stuff there at that store. And the one of the owners there also later on in life had a store at a mall where they had like the X-Men action figures. The guy was into the X-Men, you know, genre. So uh, in that area, I you know I grabbed on also to that, you know, that comic book, you know, style from, you know, watching these other type, you know, people. It wasn't just, you know, from the south side where I came from, everybody just acting gangster cholos. And, you know, when the movie came out, The Warriors, these kids started wearing these vests that were kind of like the Warriors. And, you know, and then they had their blue bandanas, and you had the red bandanas fighting against the blue bandanas. I don't know if they ever claimed the, you know, I don't know if that time down here existed where there was Bloods and Crips, but they had their own colors and their own meanings for their for the red and the blue bandanas. And so yeah, at that time I really didn't get into too much of who was who. I just knew there was a guy named Shark, and later on he opened a lowrider club, and him and my brother didn't ever get along. You know, they also had the little scrimmage. You know, because in these elementary playgrounds, usually where they would go and fight. So my brother had an issue with that guy in that area, and and then there's some other people, you know, that that I had to maneuver around. Oh, and another story that I remember. It was super cold, and it was my birthday, and I wanted a birthday party. And this is how I used to, you know, like I said, like I always was trying to, you know, maneuver and try to get things manipulate the situation to work out for me. So at that time, I got in trouble in school, and they weren't gonna give me a birthday party. And plus, it was super cold. You know, there was the the weather just wasn't, you know, permitted to have a party. So I told everybody that I was having a birthday party. I said, I'm gonna have a birthday party. I don't care. And that's just the type of kid I was. So I told everybody, and they came to my house that day, and it was super cold. It was like freezing, and all these kids were, showing up at my house with gifts. And my mom was like, no, no, no. And instead of letting me keep the gifts, she told everybody, no, there's no birthday party. He lied. So she told everybody the truth. And I'm like, So I saw these kids come up to the house and knock on my door and like, happy birthday. And then my mom had to turn them away and tell them the story. So that was embarrassing. So I learned not to do that ever again because it was really embarrassing having to go back to school and having everybody, tell you, what the fuck, man? Why'd you lie? So, and then they were coming dressed, really cool. They were coming in their best, in their best, in their best clothes, thinking that there was a birthday party. But yeah, so I learned not to do that again. Other than that, I don't know. I don't know what else you say about that neighborhood. Well, that's about it. I think I passed the time. I don't know. I don't think TikTok's gonna allow me to put an hour. Hopefully they will. But yeah, y'all have a good night. And this is another sit down with DM. El Cuervo. Ah! Y'all keep cool. Have a good night.